Now, of the 3 books, this is the one which is most obviously aimed at a business market rather than an educational or wider market. So sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to apply it within a school setting. But certainly for anyone who's working in marketing or admissions, it's pretty obvious how you can apply this to your school. Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thinking and acting strategically is the key to both securing the future of your school and helping to build a more equal and just world. My name's Juliette Corbett. I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator specialising in helping independent schools. In this podcast, I translate tried and tested strategy and fundraising techniques into a language that works for schools. So if you're a senior leader in a private school and you want your daily work to feel less exhausting and more strategic, and if you want once more to feel the joy of making the world a better place through education, then you're in the right place. Welcome, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode where I'm going to be sharing with you 3 of my favourite books for school leaders. I love reading books and listening to audiobooks as well. I basically constantly have a number of different books on the go. And one of the things that I really love is finding books that are not necessarily aimed at schools, but which have a really strong message for a new approach that we could be developing and really embedding within our schools. So this week, I've got 3 books that I'm going to talk about very, very briefly, just to give you a flavour of each, to let you know whether or not this is a book that might be helpful for you. And each of them are aimed at different types of leaders within schools. So if the first one's not quite right for you, don't worry, listen on. I've got something for senior leaders, I've got something for anyone who's organising events at schools, and then my third book is really going to be useful for people in marketing and admissions. I just want to pause for a moment to say thank you to you. The Independent School Podcast has now passed its 2nd birthday, published more than 100 episodes and has had over 6,000 listens. As the founder and host of this podcast, I've been really humbled by the number of people who have told me that it's really helped them. From school heads who've rushed up to me at conferences and told me how it's been a real guide for them through tricky times, through to experienced directors of development who have said it reassures them that they're on the right track. So thank you for listening and for all your kind comments along the way. If this podcast is helping you, then I invite you to join the 300 people who have asked to get my weekly emails. That way you'll hear about each episode as it's published, as well as the special offers that I only tell people about when they're on my mailing list. So to get my weekly emails, you can go to www.consultjuliette.co.uk/sign up. Okay, so my first favourite book that I recommend to school leaders is a book that I've gifted to school leaders more than any other. It's called Turn the Ship Around. It's by an author called David Marquet, and he is a former commander of a US nuclear submarine. Not normally my go-to subject, I have to say, but his key message is so relevant for senior leaders within schools. And that is, he believes that as a leader, you can't take every decision yourself. You can't drive through every change that you need to make in your school just by force of your own personality. It doesn't work that way. So as he puts it, instead of that, what you need to do is create a workplace where everyone takes responsibility for their actions, where everyone is a leader. This book is basically about telling the story about how he turned around his submarine crew from being the worst performing crew in the US fleet to being the best performing. And along the way, he tells a lot of stories about the lessons that he's learned around how you can apply this much more widely to organisational leadership. So it's lessons in training everyone to be a leader, and it's fully applicable well outside the military and including definitely within schools. And the main theme is really thinking about what does it look like in your school if everyone is leading at their own level, in their own department, if they're taking responsibility for their actions, they're taking responsibility for delivering that shared vision, a really delegated, distributed model of leadership. And if we can achieve that, our schools can drive forwards in terms of evolving to serve our pupils the best they can, much, much more quickly than they can if they're just relying on one charismatic leader at the top to drive everything forwards. So I highly recommend it, called Turn the Ship Around by L. David Marquet. The second book that I'm going to recommend to you is called The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. And this is an excellent book for anyone who organises events within schools. So development offices, admissions teams, anyone that's organising drama productions, speech days, sixth form balls. And let's face it, there's a lot of events that happen within schools. Anyone involved in any of those can benefit from reading this book. So Priya Parker is trained in conflict resolution and facilitation, and she's led gatherings of some of the world's most powerful people, not all of whom are agreeing with each other over the particular topic in question. And the key message that she has from that experience that she explains within the book is that when we meet, we're spending one of our most precious, non-renewable resources. That's time. So we need to make it worthwhile for everyone by running a much more thoughtful type of gathering. So in order to make that real for people, what she does is she runs through in her book a list of things that you need to be thinking about every time you're curating an event, or as she calls them, gatherings. So the book covers steps all the way from the beginning, like making sure that you have a purpose for your gathering and a shared understanding of what that gathering is for, thinking about who to invite, where to hold the event, how to get people excited before they even turn up at your event, how to be a proactive host and to gently but firmly set the rules for your gathering to make people feel comfortable when they're there, and then how to end an event well and what happens after a really successful gathering. It is a beautiful book. It's really easy to read. She tells a story as she goes through it around many of the gatherings that she's been involved with. And it's a really, really new, fresh way of looking at events that we hold within schools. So that's my second recommendation. My third recommended book for school leaders is called Lingo. Discover your ideal customer's secret language and make your business irresistible by Jeffrey Shaw. Now, of the three books, this is the one which is most obviously aimed at a business market rather than an educational or wider market. So sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to apply it within a school setting. But certainly for anyone who's working in marketing or admissions, it's pretty obvious how you can apply this to your school. So the author, Jeffrey Shaw, is a portrait photographer who now works with other entrepreneurs in the creative industries, helping them to build successful businesses. And the key message of the book is that once you've identified your ideal customer, or in school's language, your ideal family, you need to attract them by speaking the same language as they do. And it's about more than just words. It's about attracting the right customers through how you define and describe your product or service, how you set your price point, everything that you have within your brand, including the visual look and the wording that you're using, flowing all the way through everything within your marketing. So to make all of that more applicable, what Jeffrey Shaw does is takes you through various different steps to align everything that you're doing in order to attract your ideal customer by speaking the same language as them. And as you read the book, if you do decide to read it, it's a really good book. You need to think a little bit more creatively about how it translates into lessons for school marketers and admissions teams. But I tell you, it's worth the effort because not everyone else is doing this. And as we know within marketing and admissions, you need to be a little bit different from everybody else to stand out from the crowd. So this book is a really good recommendation because not everyone is doing it this way. And it gives you a new way of looking at your marketing and admissions by thinking about how to speak your ideal family's secret language. So those are the three books that I recommend, and the links to all of these are on the episode notes for this week's episode. I'm going to give you a little bonus. I can't help it at the end. There is a fourth book that actually I'm not going to talk about in length now, but I think is also really worth a look at. It's called The Long Game, How to Be a Long-Term Thinker in a Short-Term World by Dorie Clark. Personally, I think everyone should be reading this book because it really encapsulates strategic thinking, which is something obviously I talk about quite a lot on the podcast, but in real layman's terms, and it kind of brings it down to a much more simplified way of thinking about being strategic, thinking strategically in a world that tends to be geared towards short-termism. So that's my little bonus recommendation at the end as well. So the links for all of these books are on the episode notes. I'd love to know which one you're intrigued to try. Do drop me an email, let me know. And then if you go ahead and read any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Have a wonderful week. I'll talk to you again next time. Bye then. Thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast, the podcast that helps senior leaders in private schools to think and act more strategically, both because they want to secure the future of their school and because they want to help build a more equal and just world. You can listen in everywhere that podcasts are available. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes or follow any of the links that I've mentioned today, just head over to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/podcast.